going.
And John can actually start now. Oh, okay. Not yet. Got it. John, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday. Yesterday, we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Ethel was in a typhoon, so I'm glad her and her family are okay. I hope everybody else in the Philippines and the area are also okay. It must be a spectacle to behold. Today, I have Iain Stewart with us today. Iain is a brand ambassador and a fabulous artist. We looked at his palette yesterday, and a very colorful palette. And Ian's going to be going over some of his images today, and then we'll do a demonstration. Please ask questions. It's a great time to ask artists that have been practicing for quite some time and know a lot of techniques, etc. questions. And with that, Iain, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure. Great to be here.
Would you like to, we can start by showing your images. And then if you like, at any point, please, I'd like to, talk more about you for a little while.
Okay.
We're going to do a screen share, Iain. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. So I'll just wing this. That's me. I'll leave you guys to read that, but I am originally, although I don't sound like it, I was born in Scotland, in Glasgow, and we moved to the States when I was very young. This year I put out a book and called In Plein Air, Light and Color by Walter Foster's Publishers. We will see that as well a little later on. And there we have, if you would like to join me next year, I will be, I do have quite a few workshops planned. And so I'm just waiting on photograph, or there's the cover of the book, which is a painting that my good friend Brenda Swenson actually owns. Here's a little sketch I did of the Ponte Vecchio. Sometimes I like to zoom right in on a subject and get rid of all the atmospherics and just concentrate on a detail. So that's what you're seeing here. This is again a little study for a larger piece, and so I'm just looking at gesture and the way maybe to treat a very complex that's actually a warship, but just looking at shape rather than trying to describe the object. It's more about the boys. This again is, you'll see paintings that are done from these sketches later on, or in a few moments. But again, this is, I was with my friend Anders, and there's the painting. And we were getting gasoline, and I looked over and there was a train graveyard. So I ran across the street and I started taking lots of pictures, and we had a great time.
Iain, is there a size sketchbook you like and prefer?
I use the Stillman and Byrne Alpha, which is, I think it's 9x11 or something like that. I don't use the Beta, which is typically, it's actually the water media version, but on the Alpha, I can paint on both sides of the paper. So, and that's what makes a sketchbook page a sketchbook page. If you paint on two sides of it, that's yours. I always say don't rip out pages, but as my friend Bill Hook said, why don't you make a sketchbook where you can rip pages out and put those for sale, or put those up for sale? And I said, what a genius. So good old Bill. So that's again, looking at from the sketch to the final, seeing how I was working out how I was going to use shape rather than thinking about this boat as a whole, and looking at how that ties together. And especially, it's nice actually that we've got the sort of crop version here on the right, how the figures tie in with the boat. So that was just a lucky moment with the camera in Gothenburg. Here is a somewhat imagined view of Crail in Scotland. It is on the East Coast, and I'll be teaching a workshop there at the end of July this year. And so these are compositions where I choose to make things up, and because nobody in their right mind would put a boat there, because it would, as the tide came in, it'd just be crashed against the rocks. But for the composition, it kind of works. So I never let, and those of you that have taken a workshop with me, I say quite often, never let reality get in the way of a good painting. And so that's, again, your great colors coming through, that punch of red, which is a cad scarlet light. This is one where I'm just seeing how much can I do with as little as possible. So this is the Grand Canal in Venice, and I am doing my best to simplify down into the base shapes that will describe this, and in a little bit of 3D. So it's just the edges. If you look up at the, well, it doesn't, if you look at where I've chosen to add a little bit of, that's just neutral tint. The areas where I've got really high contrast, that's where I want you to look, but then I want you to be able to explore. So that's why, again, I'm introducing those verticals at right. Here is a larger, I think this is a half sheet. Well, I know it's a half sheet. And of Notre Dame. And again, just me letting the inner architect go and doing, taking on as much detail as I want. But typically what happens in these pieces is I do everything and get it really quite detailed and nice, and then I begin to scrub away at things. So it's you can't do that without, you can't get the effects I'm doing without putting down something fairly strong. This is just a little quick plein air 15-20 minute piece I did right around the corner from my house. I live in a small southern railroad town, and so this kind of view is all around me. So I'm that weird guy that stands out with an easel that everybody knows because it's a small town, but and they know now not to bug me. So, and this is another version of that, the train graveyard that I visited with Anders Anderson. And in this piece, actually, what I was wanting to do is just go for as heavy and as powerful an image that I could make to describe this train and the weight that it carries. I think the title of the piece is 734, which is the name of the train, but I was going to title it Looking Down the Barrel of a Gun, because that's that kind of, once something that large gets moving, there's no stopping it. But then also I wanted, again, to define areas and then allow areas to bleed out. And, I don't feel that I always have to describe everything. It's, knowing when to let go is a good idea in the way I do that. And this is one of my favorite little sketches from Florence. It's a really intricate scene, but again, I'm taking just the information I want. And I think it describes the scene quite well. And without getting too bogged down, you know, I can run through a few of these. So if I'm in a city and I know that I want to get around and do a lot of painting, quite often I'll just leave the easel at home and take a backpack with my with just my sketchbook. So I cover a lot more ground that way. And you get to know a city on much deeper level. This is one I did of Venice, and it won an award at the American Watercolor Society, the Marge Soroka Memorial Award. And it's, again, I go between this. I'm an architectural illustrator as well as a fine artist. And sometimes I allow that distinction to mingle, and for those two sides of me to kind of meet in the middle. So I can do quite accurate drawings and get into the detail of it. But then sometimes, you know, especially today when I'm doing something, I've got a little bit of, you know, time crunch, then I'm not going to go for that kind of thing. But I like to change things up. If I feel that I'm doing the same thing over and over, then I get bored. If I get bored, I don't paint. So I have to keep things interesting. This is another, just the way I look at the world. We all know Notre Dame and Paris, but the thing that interested me in this was this garbage truck. And so the title of this painting is Camion Poubelle, which is sort of a slang term for a garbage truck, but it's obviously a Parisian painting. And so having that in the background gives definition to it, but you know, what I'm pulling into focus is the everyday and the mundane. And this is another painting. This is a full sheet. And this is a hydroelectric plant that has a huge bridge going over. It's about 30 miles from me, and we used to kayak below it. So I had to reach out. This is before selfie sticks. Reach out as far as I could over the railing and take pictures and hope that it worked. And I didn't drop the camera, but it's a fairly dramatic view. And again, that's me just playing with there's all sorts of conduit and scaffolding and stuff like that that you know, you choose where to put your emphasis in. This is a little demo that, again, if you've taken a workshop with me, as you may be quite familiar with, is different ways to paint different types of scene all on one piece of paper. So this is just a quarter sheet taped down and 4 different landscapes put in with different effects and different lighting. And it's really a nice way to be able to explore, simplify shape, and just keep it changing up, because by the time you get around to the last one, the next one's drying or is maybe getting a little too dry for me to keep an edge the way I want it to. So it's when you paint 4, there's really it's an exercise in being able to look about 17 different places at the same time. And I've had this one described as a futuristic self-portrait. This is just a guy on a balcony in New Orleans, and he's grilling something and having a beer and a smoke of a pipe, and either going to sit down or just check what's being cooked and go back in. So it's one of these sort of slice of life paintings. And this is one from Turkey and called The Chestnut Vendor. And if you have been to Istanbul, they roast chestnuts, and you can get them just about on any corner. They also do mussels, which are delicious as well. So if you're in a strange place, don't be shy. Try the weird food. It's good. And I think this is the second image I got into the AWS.
I'm seeing a lot of yellows and blues.
Hi, everyone. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. This is the Roosevelt Bridge, and obviously it's taken from the cable car. So you'll see this view quite often because it's one of the only chances you get to get up above one of these bridges and get really close to it. And you have to kind of get onto the cable car really quickly and get your place before.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
On the previous image, how do you get the unified gradation over the ironwork of the bridge when it's very clean lace work,
Yeah.
but have a unified gradation through there? Can you explain how you technically accomplish that? Thank you.
Yes. So that's me actually using Triscuit or masking fluid. So just in the negative, I painted the sky first, and then I masked the negative shape inside the bridge and painted through that. So that's just a graded wash then with me dropping in some neutral tint, I think, and probably a few other colors to get it to go dark as we approach the top of the bridge. But it's rather effective. I'm always experimenting. This one I turned to the wall, which I do to many of my paintings, and forgot about it for about a month because I didn't know how to finish it. And I pulled it, I was just looking for a board to stretch, and I stumbled across this one and had it finished in a couple of hours. It just needed these really heavy darks. And if you see in the foreground the cobalt blue and the burnt sienna, that's where I just used that to get that nice and punchy. It was a little too clean. So.
I have a question.
Sure.
Your geometric shapes that you have, and then it looks like either you did the wash before your geometric shapes, or you did the geometric shapes and put the wash in.
I'm not sure which image. Are we talking about the bridge?
Go back, yeah, go back to the bridge. You see in the middle bottom, those rectangles, very
Yeah.
geometric, right?
Yeah.
And it needs to be like, controlled when you do that.
Yeah.
And even like the bridge, that really nice sharp edge, but it looks like you have a wash going on too. So I'm just wondering.
So as an architectural illustrator, you have to learn how to paint with extreme accuracy and be able to paint to, maybe cover the same area 2-3 times and avoid, paint around the shapes that you don't want to hit. Like I said, I don't use masks very often, so that's what I did in that case there. But that was becoming a distraction in the lower portions of the painting for me. It was just taking my eye out, and so that's where I just decided to put in that dark cobalt, very, very strong cobalt and burnt sienna in there. So that's just me doing, pulling on some of the techniques I used as an illustrator. So yeah, I'll never fully let go of that. These are skills that took a long time to learn. But I find that, you know, sometimes I enjoy the more immediate paintings, and then sometimes I enjoy spending a lot of time with them. So it really depends on the mood I'm in. I've been doing a lot of quick ones lately.
Ian,
Yes.
there is someone in Facebook, Terry, would like to know the colors that you used in this sky, beautiful sky, the bridge.
It's, if you know me, it's gonna be burnt sienna and cobalt blue.
Okay, thank you.
Those are probably, if you come to my workshop and you can, you know, you just had to bring 3 colors, cobalt blue, burnt sienna, and a neutral tint, and leave everything else at home. It's, I don't know, it's just one of my favorite mixes. There's
Okay, thank you so much.
something nice about the temperature there. And this is the last sort of exhibition painting I did. I completed this a couple of weeks ago. And I am, and always have been, just enamored with working boats. And then also these sort of gritty images. So there's about 4 hours from me to the coast, there's a lot of bayous, and in that area of the southern United States, there are a lot of shipyards. And so you can basically walk onto these things, and as long as you show them, and I've done this time and time again, if I just show a sketchbook or something like that and talk to a few people and say I won't get under anything, you know, I'll stay safe, they'll let me come in. And so that's just me poking around. And the Pelican was actually an addition. This is called the Supervisor. And I mean, the image is about the guys working underneath this unbelievably heavy thing that floats in water. But then I couldn't help myself with just being tempted by having this Pelican kind of checking their work, I guess, in the way that a supervisor might. And there are my links.
May I add a comment?
Sure.
By adding the Pelican, you add an aspect of flight and air
Yeah.
to the image.
Well, and there's a large portion, that's the main portion of the painting that has no color on it. You know, in watercolor, we reserve the white of the paper. And so that is a big directional move to the supervisor. Now that cuts at the arc of the bow of the boat, but it just depends on you and the way you look at things, whether or not that's going to be a problem compositionally or not. To me, it's not. But that's the wonderful thing about it, is we're all different. We can look at things and make decisions, you know, based on what we want to do. And what, you know, my goal is not to paint like anybody. My goal is to paint the way I want to and express myself and how a place makes me feel. And so I'm affected by many people, and undeniably have seen work that made me think and stuck with me. But there's always, my father's a painter and still does, you know, he's a very, very good watercolorist. So it took me a long time to get out from underneath his shadow. And so I learned that at a very young age, is in order to paint like yourself, you've got to put down some of the things that you've learned and really concentrate on seeing in the way that you want to. So for me, that I did that with my sketchbooks.
So Ian, would you like to, because I want to make sure you have enough time, would you like to start the demonstration?
Sure.
Oh, maybe can I ask one more question?
Yes, man.
Hi,
with
Ian.
glasses.
You're an amazing artist. And what question I have to you? Do you plan your, because sometimes for me your color not that simple set of colors you use in artwork. Are you spontaneous on it, or do you plan it on smaller sketches, for example, and that stuff?
It depends. Sometimes I'll go in knowing the atmospheric conditions that I'll want to paint, which will definitely direct my color choices. But although I do have 21 colors, I think, in my palette, there's about 8 of them that I use with a lot of regularity. I'll show you a little bit in my sketchbook about the way I go about beginning to explore how I create a painting. So it just depends. Sometimes, yes, I'll do a full color version, and other times I'll just do maybe a graphite sketch of it, checking proportions and seeing if compositionally it works, and then I'll begin painting. It depends if sometimes I like the spontaneity.
No, I believe you cannot fully get my question. Do you, because I do sometimes, usually I go without any sketch on my artworks. When they're long at least and pretty complicated, sometimes I'm still unsure even when I start work. I usually start work when I'm completely sure what I will do on it. But sometimes when I'm unsure, I do very small thumbnail, even thumbnail size, small sketches for my artwork to see how these colors will, this palette you choose, how it will work.
Sorry, Misha. Sorry. Thank you so much for the input there. If there are other questions, perhaps we can just table it in a little while so that we can start with Ian's demo for the interest of time. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully
Thank you, Misha.
This will answer your question. So just to give you an idea, here is the reference photo. And this is the Isle of Bute in Scotland, which is sort of southwest of Glasgow, and where my family, my uncle had a boat. And so we spent time on it when I was a kid. And so I know this place really well. And so I sort of make a pilgrimage here every time I go. And these are the ferries that carry you back and forth. So in getting ready for this, this is a fairly typical page where I'm doing some study of the way the boat's put together, and then I'm looking at it larger and thinking about, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but these crossing lines and where I might crop things and stuff like that. Quite often I'll let my sketches grow organically. And so that gives me a nugget of an idea. What I wanted to do for you today was paint something that I have not painted. So instead of painting that, I painted another scene on the same island. And this is Port Bannatyne, where the boat was usually moored. And so this gives me an idea of the type of palette I might use. But then again, I've got this reference photo. Whether or not I choose to make this, to keep in tune or keep close to what I'm actually seeing here, or if I want to change things around, that just depends. So let me let me show you that. And I've done a little bit of work, but not much. So what I did, and there's an explanation for this, is, well, to save time, because you'll see, is I ended up going with a much more landscape focus or format than the original sketch. I like that. You'll also notice that I pushed the horizon up quite a bit, and that gives me a lot of area to play with. So the plan here is to kind of let this painting fade out. So especially in demo situations, you want to give yourself an out, meaning you want to be able to get just enough done to get away. So this is the way I look at sketching as well. If you've got a sketch that's got decent bones, you can stop at just about any point and walk away. Now, if I don't finish this, I'll finish it and I'll post it. But I wanted to get this in for this simple reason. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. And yes, I know I turned it upside down. So brushes. I use a number of different brushes, but I actually don't have my favorites out. This is an Escoda Kolinsky. This is the Escoda Perla, and just smaller version of the same brush. I used some flat. I have a scrubbing brush. This thing's 40 years old, probably. And then a palette knife. And I've just dripped water on this. For those of you that are aspiring to be demo artists, or those of you that may want to just sympathize, don't sweat it. This is live. There's not much you can do. So prepare, of course, but give yourself a little bit of a break. What I want to do is soften this. And we all know we could do that wet and wet. This is a little Payne's gray, which is a different color than my dot card, I know. And I just want to go over right away. I got into that.
And do you wet and stretch your paper?
No. Well, if I'm doing a large full sheet, yeah.
And can you tell us what you have your paper attached to? What is the
This is Gator board.
Gator board? Okay.
So I can zoom in right now to let you guys sort of see what I'm doing. So in essence, what I'm doing is wanting to soften this edge of this distant hill. I actually need to stand up to do quite a lot of this work. I stand most of the time for painting. And I rely quite heavily on, if you see how I'm making these kind of flick movements, they give me a ragged edge. That's something I like. I'm going to introduce a little bit of blue sky. With that, there'll be going to be a little bit of the same mixture, which is just Payne's gray, with whatever junk is around. around the corner of my palette there. And what I'm going to do is start to think about cloud shape.
And people would like to know what paper you're painting on.
This is Saunders Waterford. Oh, 140 cold press. So I'm going to take some of the intensity out of that blue, but I don't want this to become too interesting. And then, and you can hear from when your brush starts to make that scraping noise, you can really tell that you're painting with your brush is a little drier. And watch what I can, So a variety of shape, edge conditions, everything. That's all in my mind when I'm doing this kind of stuff. Thinking about the underside of these clouds.
And is your paper hot press or cold press?
This is cold press, or rough, actually, I think.
And are you painting on an angle right now or flat on your table?
So not much of one. I've got a piece of tape holding this. It's just, normally I paint about there, but things tend to keystone a little bit when I'm doing demos. Like if I'm doing a demo outside and standing at my easel, I've kind of got I'm just going to drop in some pure blue, a little bit more punch on that edge. I've got to actually stand to the side of my piece because I'll block the view. So now we get that. If I wind up with blooms and whatnot, that's where better to have a bloom than in the sky, And I've got a little
That
spray
leads to
bottle.
a question of,
Sure.
do you have a philosophy on whether or not blooms, how you feel about blooms in your painting?
On the right kind of texture, I love them. It just depends, on what, on where they're taking place. So in more organic shapes, yeah. Especially in painting like this, I don't like to be overly controlling. But what I'm looking for are patterns, and if things are too organized. I'm gonna leave that boat. I'll start working on this little here. Now notice this guy. Do you see it in the painting? No. I didn't like it. I didn't find it interesting. I didn't think the painting itself needed it, so I took it out. So as I said and say, don't let reality get in the way of a good painting or in the way of a possibly good painting. Hopefully.
Where is this place?
This is the Isle of Bute in Scotland. It is about 30 minutes by train from Glasgow Queen Street Station. And then you get on that ferry and you have enough time to grab a pint and get some nice an ocean breeze, and then you're off and walking around Butte. And you can rent a bicycle a few steps away. So it's really kind of nice. So I'm just setting up a few colors here for this building. And again, while I'm doing that, I'm going to zoom in. Might as well take care of or take advantage of the technology. Now, I want, that's a little bit of, watch this. I'm dropping in a little bit of burnt sienna there, or that's actually Quin Gold, or Quin Burnt Orange. And since I've changed the sky, I've turned Scotland, you know, a typical day in Scotland into a sunny day in Scotland, which is rarely the case. These little save whites are going to do some nice stuff. Hopefully. We'll see.
And can you share with us how your palette of colors have evolved?
Yeah. As well, I'll tell you this. As I taught at the actual Daniel Smith store, and I was allowed to go in the back and look at colors and experiment with them, that did a lot for the way I started to think about my palette. And I like consistency, which these colors certainly have. But I like to be able to get as much as I can out of each one. So I'm careful and think about hold on, I'm just, when I go quiet, guys, that just means I'm thinking, which is not all that often, but so if I find that something works, I'm going to go with it, right? And I can't be, you know, overly concerned with that. It's hard for, that said, it's hard for a color to make it onto my into my palette. I always have one well that's the tester, and you can, you know, any color can spend, you know, a few weeks on the tester, but to actually break through to the palette and get into the show, nah, that's a little harder for it to do, or a little harder. And for those of you that have never tried speaking and painting at the same time, I highly recommend it. It is one of the joys of my life. And I'll try to keep the...
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understood that correctly. Did you say speaking and painting at the same time is one of your joys in life?
Yeah, but I was being facetious.
Okay, because I'm just thinking like you should try doing this with kids on your arms.
No, I had to teach myself. I learned by my dogs. I taught them because they'll listen to you, and none of them are any good at painting, but they certainly listened. So yeah, that's a skill you have to learn if you're going to be in this. So here we've got a little concrete. There's always in Scotland, somebody has torn down something beautiful, or probably more accurately, something made of stone that is beautiful has fallen down, and someone has come behind it and put up stonework.
Yeah, which colors are you using for the roof and the sides of the building?
What?
What colors are you using for the roof and the sides of the building?
Okay, that's actually alizarin crimson with a little bit of cobalt teal blue and some burnt sienna, or some raw sienna, I'm sorry. That's the roof. The sides of the building have that same mixture with just a little more raw sienna. So, and what I'll do is I'll just drop in little bits of this. And then now,
Ian, if you had to pick only 6 colors, what would those 6 be?
you guys don't fool around, do you? 6 colors. I'd choose a yellow, a violet, a blue, an earth orange. All these would be earth tones. And then something that can get them all dark, like neutral tint. But I would also look at anybody that asked me to do that with a Paddington Bear look in my eye of, why are you making me choose only this many? Because that is ridiculous. Little.
They're asking that because about 2 weeks ago, I asked them that question.
Ah, it's
Yeah,
tough. So here's a little trick.
It was
For
quite
you guys.
ridiculous. I get 6 colors, a very small amount. They were very, very generous group in trying to oblige it. So thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, that's what, so when I taught university, they'd have to use neutral tint for the first couple of weeks. And I wouldn't, so there we go on the boat. And until they started understanding value, I wouldn't let them touch that. But that's the joys of being a university professor, is you get to tell people what they have to do. And they kind of have to do it. If I walked into a workshop and said the same thing, there would be very mixed results in that. Yeah, so this part of the painting is pretty much done. You know, so I just need to work on this. I'm gonna put a little blue.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, you may.
I see that you're mixing your pigments on the palette so that the pigments on the paper are very neutralized. And I see a pop of red. Do you charge your wet washes with clean color at any point through this, or?
Oh yeah,
not?
wait until you see this. So it's, yeah, I'll use different, I know this is all drying. So I know I've got a little bit of time. So in the interim, I'm just trying to get it to a point, you know, where I could step back and go, well, that was decent, and not, you know, sulk for the rest of the day. What's happening, I mean, if you see this blue, and I do have to zoom in there. right? So you see that blue, it's moving into, didn't keep the edge there, and I didn't want to. I don't mind if these things start to move, the color starts to move a little bit. We'll do the same thing here. So this is just pure cadmium scarlet. And here we have a typical British, Scottish telephone booth. And on this island, there's still telephone booths. You'll notice, you can see how that red is spread out throughout the wet wash, but it's still holding its shape. And that's another thing. I know I use different line weights when I'm drawing because the structure, the drawing actually does a lot of work for me in my paintings. So the same thing here. They save money on paint. Maybe they buy it in bulk, but the mailboxes are the same color. And now I'm just going to take a little undersea green, a little bit of Quin gold, and a little bit of, what is it? Cobalt teal blue. And this is exactly the way I would work in my sketchbook. So now I should have some little alarm bells starting to ring. I need a sand mixture. If we look at this again, oh, sorry. Scotland, it's green for a reason, and it rains all the time. Well, if we look in here and we see all this seaweed, and then I'm looking at the lightest lights and the patterns they're making, because what happens is the tide pushes up and pushes that seaweed up to different levels. So that's what I'm thinking about as I address this area of the painting.
Ian, how often do you swap out your water?
When it becomes apparent that I absolutely have to, I have two buckets. I have one for clean water, I have one for dirty water, and quite often they get mixed. But when my dirty water really becomes noticeable, I'll probably switch it out. Now, as happens in Scotland quite often too, maybe there is a drain or they're allowing some water to go out. So now you see this area of the painting there's a lot of mingling going on. But I need to juice this up, so I'm going to get more of that Quin gold. This time I'm going to use French ultramarine and just a little bit of alizarin crimson.
I'm loving how that sky is setting up.
Yeah, you just let it go. I mean, if you're going to steal from the best, not that I'm saying I'm stealing, but I mean, the way I paint skies is directly influenced by a man named Roland Tilder. And if you don't know who that guy is, and you've never seen his paintings, I know what you need to do for the, after this. If you're if you're aware of who Robert Wade is,
Yes.
he used to paint with Roland. Roland used to be the president of the Royal Institute of Watercoloring. No slouch. And the man could create a sky like you would not believe. So into the same green mixture, I'm going to put some yellow, which is raw sienna. And then I will get a little bit of that cobalt teal blue, and we'll try and make, and a little, whenever I use a lot of green, I immediately start thinking about getting some alizarin crimson in there. And I start making some areas of this washed up. Maybe that's not the best analogy. This wonderful, what's it called? Seaweed. So this is very, as I said before, very much the way I would paint in my sketchbook. And I'm relying quite a lot on wet and wet techniques here. Now let's get
Are
some
you able
red.
to zoom out just a little bit more, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So
Do
we
you
got a
still
lot of
have,
red there. So that's why I'm starting to think I need to add some, because it'll neutralize, because I'm putting it into a green. It'll neutralize to a degree. And if you want to hold an edge in drawing, in painting wet and wet, you need to go strong with the colors that you're mixing, or they're on your brush, sorry. So being aware of how loaded your brush is, how much water's on the paper, and then how loaded your brush is. There's so much stuff going on in your mind. That's why when people ask me, you should get, why don't you paint or try a different medium? And my answer is always, I've only begun to scratch the surface of what watercolor can do. And it interests me so very much. Why would I let go of that? Okay, I'm gonna create a
And
bit of this road.
we can dive so deep into this medium. There is no bottom to it.
No, but
uh,
we're also a little bit weird, aren't we, watercolorists? I think we enjoy a little punishment because, if you're not ruining paintings, you're not learning. Every year I begin to ruin paintings. And if I don't, I begin to question what's going on. So I'm making a mix of French ultramarine and alizarin crimson that's still got a bit of that dirt. And watch, I'm just going to grade this. See the sense of light around that? And then I'm going to just keep adding this Payne's gray. If you want to paint loosely, paint quickly with a big brush. Now I'm going to start adding neutral tint to that and a little bit of burnt sienna, because what I want to do is warm this up. Because in all sorts or all painting, typically what happens is what's going on in the background is bluer and less defined. And what is going on in the foreground is warmer and more defined. I'm at one of those points in a demonstration where I'm not really in control of my what comes out of my mouth. They said that's not really taking anything anymore. There's some dark. Let that sit. Let me put in the shadow side of this. I know we're at our time limit. Is that correct?
Yes, but a couple minutes is no problem, Ian.
Thanks, John. I can't promise it'll be worth it, but I'll do my best.
If you could also, if you're going to add more things to it at a later time, could you post it to Facebook so we can all see your finished work?
Yeah, I will definitely. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating that. This is a new mix for me. This cobalt teal blue, alizarin crimson, and a little bit of what is it? Cobalt blue, and that just really works wonders. I don't want too many darks out there, but I do need to shape this guy. So this is turned away from the sun. And by the way, this is a Craig Young palette. The palette that you use is not really going to do much to help your painting. The only reason I got it is I had a little Italian palette that rusted, and I had taken it all over the world that I had explored to that point. And it killed me to lose it. So I went, well, that won't happen again. And this shadow color to me is just really, when you start putting in shadow, that's when things really begin to, your shapes take form.
Yeah, and I have a question. On your
Sure.
dot card, you got Chinese white. I was just wondering, how do you use the white in your paintings?
The white?
The Chinese white, yeah.
Well, if you wanted like a lavender or something a little less, transparent, that works well. But I would also say it makes great, if I wanted like smoke coming out of this chimney and or to play with clouds or play with some wet and wet, then it's really very useful at that point. And your shadow should tie things together. I'm always thinking about these shapes and how they go together.
May I ask a follow-up question on your color choice?
Yep.
I'm hearing you're often choosing blacks or neutral tints. And why is it that you choose convenience mixture rather than mixing those from colors and making them more colorful, why you have made that choice. And I've seen that you mentioned that as a teacher and through your personal palette and demonstrations. Thank you.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. It just depends. It just depends on how I feel. If I think something's going to work, then that's going to be my approach. But if you watch here, I'm going to come in with some pretty strong color and let it actually mix on the paper. So this is Naples yellow. And you want to talk about, we've all seen what hematite will do, right? Something we may not, and something I talk about quite a bit in my workshops, is our invading and receiving colors, i.e. colors that if you put them next to one another, they're going to push or they're going to pull. So if you had, say, cobalt blue, that's a receiving color. If you have burnt sienna next to it. And so what happens is this very, very strong, and you'll be able to really be more apparent once it dries, strong Naples yellow is pushing the wet paint that's around it out of its way, which I quite enjoy. And then I know we're hitting our time. Let me just put some.
Do you have a favorite subject that you like to visit often?
This island. But I mean, I guess I'm known for painting cityscapes. That's not really the case. I really like urban decay. I like big machines that are rusting away. And again, we've got some nice little wet and wet things happening here.
The spelling of Roland Tilfer, is it Tillfor?
Hilder.
Hilver. Oh, Hilver.
Yes.
Thank you.
Look at his sky.
I will. I've tried to look and I didn't have the spelling.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's magical.
Iain, do you use at all McCracken's black?
I haven't tried it yet. I mean, Lauren and I are good friends. I was teaching in Houston, Texas, and the ladies there said that Lauren had it was either a green or a red that he used. And I said, I want a color. So I just made one up. And so they then went in Photoshop. Well, not Photoshop. This is before Photoshop. They cut these little pictures out, and I'll have to post that as well, and made this little collage of me and Lauren on the cover of Watercolor Artist. It amused me to no end. So I'm just going to toss in a couple of little bricks. I don't need to do anything to explain that there's a railing going on there, you know. I can.
Iain, Nancy in Facebook would like to know if the alizarin crimson you use is the permanent version or the normal one.
Permanent.
Permanent, thank you.
Do
And there we
you
go, guys.
do you like to work off of compliments or warms and cools to get depth in your paintings?
Both. Depends on what, so there's always a point in every painting's life where it is more important that you listen and you look at the painting rather than your subject. And if you begin to really think about that, that just allows you to be more in tune with what's going on, and you really watch the painting for when, you know, that time may be. If you expect that, you'll tend to be more successful, I find. Because at some point, this no longer needs this for me to understand it. In fact, it's better that I'm not looking at this anymore and I'm looking at this, because that's the reality of the painting that I'm doing. That'll hold just a tiny bit of an edge, and then we'll call this. And so there's our road. There's really huge sidewalks in Scotland, or in this island, not all over Scotland. So there we go. As far as the demo, there's stuff that I'll with, but I mean, look at how that edge is holding up. So we see the road coming in. We've got our directional lines leading to what I think is the subject. This boat is not stealing from that in any way. The only real problem I have, and I can fix this right now, is I actually know that there's a spit of land. Oh, Iain, don't mess this up. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean about don't let reality get in the way. There's a spit of land coming in there. So now the boat used to be equally divided, and now I've changed that. So that was the only thing. That boat was static within this, you know, within this. Now, this kind of stuff, you can just go to town with.
That was my next question. Do you have any fancy tools from Home Depot that you use?
Just the palette knife. I mean, it makes great little, marks. And the nice thing about the palette knife is it's, you can't really control the mark. So it's anything that keeps me from being in control. There's a certain amount of that I embrace, and then, you know, and then you let what's happening on the paper happen, because if you fight it, it's going to do it anyway, right? So you might as well just
Could you zoom
grin and
in?
let it happen.
Sorry.
You know?
Could you zoom in one more time to the house, like that extra? Thank you.
So I'll do a little bit of work there with some neutral tint and pop those windows, things like that. I like how this wet and wet edge and this hard edge are working together to pull our eye in, because this can be a very awkward shape, you know. But it's pushing. I think it's working. And so I'm looking at it on my monitor, and which is great, by the way, because you can see it at many different scales. If I'm during a show, I'll look at it on the laptop, but I'll also project it to the television for that same reason. So at this point in a demonstration, then I step back and I go, all right, I need to let this marinate for just a little bit. And I'm just spritzing that just a little bit. And then I'll come back and see what I need. But there's an immediacy to a demo, sorry, that's hard to replicate. And so I'm a little careful how much I do to that off camera, if that makes sense.
So Ian, if you could post that is your final, or if you're going to add anything to it, if you could post it to Facebook, we'd certainly appreciate that a lot.
I'll put it on your page and I'll post it on mine too, of course. But
excellent.
But yeah,
Thank you
it's
for joining today.
Excuse me?
I said thank you for joining today. It was fabulous watching you.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and thanks for taking time out of your Friday to join us.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll just have a quick show of our gallery look so that Ian would at least more or less see who's with us today. Becky, can you help us do a gallery look, a gallery view, please?
Oh, we've got a lot of hiya.
You had 105 in the Zoom.
Thank you.
That my son, who's 24 now, I did a demo with, I don't know, 300 some people, and he just looked at me and said, 300 people came to watch you paint? Yes. How did you like dinner tonight that we bought for you? But he was just dumbfounded that would happen. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, everybody.
And everybody have a great Friday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
John and
See
everyone.
you next week.
Christmas for everyone.
No, not next week.